After Alex cheated, I didn't mention divorce. Instead, I continued to act as if everything was normal. We remained affectionate for another 2 years, until I found out I was pregnant. Finally, I handed him a divorce agreement. He refused to agree, but by then, I was already part of a wealthy family. I really didn't need to endure anymore. Chapter 01. Alex returned in the early morning. He was still impeccably dressed in a suit, his tie perfectly arranged, as though he had just escaped from an important meeting. "Darling, why aren't you asleep yet?" He walked over, taking my hand, the warmth of his palm spreading through me. "Didn't I tell you not to wait up for me if I had to work late?" He smelled faintly of fresh shower gel, as if he had deliberately washed away some trace of something. I couldn't help but think, even when it comes to working late, Alex is the kind of person who seeks perfection. I pulled my hand back and pushed the pregnancy test results toward him. "I'm pregnant. 12 weeks. The air suddenly froze. Alex's body visibly stiffened. His pupils shrank sharply, his fingers unconsciously clenching and unclenching, his knuckles turning white, and the veins on his temples standing out. In the dim light, I could hear his breathing become heavier, and I saw his Adam's apple bobbing up and down once, then twice. He looked at me, and in the next moment, he sat down hard on the sofa. "Abort it. I won't hold it against you." What man wouldn't care if his wife cheated on him? Unless he had done something unforgivable to his wife first. I stared into his eyes, my voice calm. "The child is yours." He jerked his head up, the corner of his mouth curling into a bitter smile. "These past 2 years, every time you made me take precautions. And we haven't been intimate for half a year. Now you're telling me the child is mine? Julia, do you think I'm that easy to fool? Believe it or not." I sat up slowly, my hand resting on my flat belly. Alex's expression froze instantly. His eyes widened, filled with emotions I had never seen before. Shock, confusion, and a flicker of almost imperceptible joy. When did this happen?" "Vanessa was pregnant for 42 days when you went to the hospital with her," I said steadily. Alex's face turned pale, as though he had been stabbed in the chest. His lips trembled, and his fingers unconsciously gripped the armrest of the sofa. How do you know?" His voice was so faint, it was almost inaudible. "I know not only that she's pregnant, but also that you've been together for 2 years. Alex threw off his suit jacket, roughly yanked off his tie, and lit a cigarette. The flame from the lighter flickered in his trembling hand, illuminating the cold sweat on his forehead. "No wonder." He exhaled a puff of smoke, his voice low. "You suddenly started making me take precautions." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with the wariness of a wounded animal. "Why didn't you say anything back then? And since you've endured it for 2 years, why not just keep enduring?" I gently touched my still flat belly, feeling the small life growing inside me. "I was waiting for you to get tired of it." My voice finally wavered. "But then Vanessa got pregnant, so I think it's time for me to leave." The sound of a cigarette being forcefully stubbed out in the ashtray echoed. Alex's lips trembled. "I will deal with Vanessa, and the child won't be born. I apologize. Now that you're pregnant, I'll take good care of you and the baby." I pulled the folder I had prepared from beneath the cushion and pushed it toward him. "Sign it, Alex. Let's part on good terms." He opened the folder, and when he saw the words divorce agreement, his fingers trembled. "You know I'm an orphan." My fingertip gently traced the ultrasound image on the pregnancy test report. "The child in my belly is my only family. Getting pregnant with him is my way of forcing myself to cut ties with you." I looked up and stared into his eyes. "I don't want to lose him." Alex stared at me, his eyes reddened, his voice hoarse. "Julia, are you saying that if I don't divorce you, you'll have to abort this child?" I nodded. "Carrying him while thinking of your 2 years of betrayal. I have no reason to persuade myself to keep him, but I can't bear to let him go." I paused. "Divorce is the only way. He'll belong to me, and I won't always wonder if my husband is with Vanessa again." My gaze fell again on the open collar of his shirt. "Just like today, when you worked late, you still had time for a shower. I wondered if you came from Vanessa's place, deliberately cleaning yourself so I wouldn't suspect anything." Alex's face paled even further. He instinctively raised his hand to cover the mark, I stood up and looked down at him from above. I don't want to become a bitter housewife. I still want to leave a good impression in your heart. So I think it's better if we separate. The living room fell into silence. The only sound was Alex's rapid breathing. The moonlight shifted, now shining directly on the divorce agreement. The black and white text glaring in the dark. He finally spoke, his voice seeming to come from a distant place. Give me some time. Let me think about it. I turned and walked toward the bedroom. 3 days. I need your answer in 3 days. I closed the bedroom door, didn't turn on the light, and just lay down on the bed. In the darkness, tears silently slid down my face. Outside the door, the sound of a glass breaking was followed by a loud slam of the door. I gently touched my belly, whispering, Alex, don't blame me. You were the one who betrayed me first. Chapter 02. Between Alex and me. It wasn't a gap, it was a distance that spanned an entire world. I was a child raised in an orphanage. Even my name was something the headmistress randomly picked off a hair dye package. And Alex Tang? On the day he was born, the stock price of Tang Group hit its limit. All the city's LED screens kept looping the message. Congratulations to the Tang family on the birth of a son. In my first year of college, when he pursued me, I thought it was just a bored rich kid's game. I returned the designer bag he gave me, and tossed his love letters straight into the trash without even reading them. That was until the stormy night when I was working the night shift at a convenience store. He ran in, drenched like a wet chicken, and slapped a black card onto the counter. I'll buy you for 3 hours, and we'll have instant noodles. When I saw his bloodshot eyes, I realized that even those born with a silver spoon could cry. I later learned that day marked the 10th anniversary of his mother's passing. Why me? I asked him after we started dating, sitting in the Michelin-starred restaurant he had booked. His hand paused as he cut into his steak. Because when you look at me, there's none of that sycophantic light in your eyes. I lowered my head and took a sip of wine, using the edge of the glass to hide the bitter smile at the corner of my mouth. He would never know that the reason I lacked light in my eyes was because I had already seen through it all. Love is nothing more than an equal exchange. Since I had to sell, I might as well sell to the highest bidder. Alex thought what moved me were the handwritten letters he sent me every day for 3 years and the family marriage he gave up for me. In truth, I had just done the math. With him, I could move from the basement to a penthouse, and I could make sure the children in the orphanage got new school uniforms. That night, in the hotel suite, as he reverently kissed my collarbone, I was counting how many facets the crystal chandelier on the ceiling had. When he called my name in passion, I was already thinking about opening an independent account at a Swiss bank tomorrow. On the night he proposed, he knelt on the yacht deck covered with rose petals, holding up a 3-carat pink diamond ring. The sea breeze ruffled his hair, and I stared at his trembling fingers, thinking, the contracts this hand has signed are worth enough to rebuild several orphanages. The media widely reported the Cinderella marries into a rich family fairy tale. Only I knew that I was just a shrewd businesswoman, turning marriage into the most profitable long-term investment. The night before the wedding, the headmistress cried, saying she was afraid I'd be taken advantage of. I smiled and wiped away her tears, thinking, who would be taken advantage of? I didn't even bring my heart into the room, no matter how deep Alex's feelings were. It was just a performance for an empty shell. In the first year of marriage, I learned to distinguish the origin and year of caviar. In the second year, I earned an EMBA from the China-Europe International Business School. In the third spring, I found a rose-colored lipstick stain on the collar of the shirt he had taken off. It wasn't the typical mauve shade I always used. As I applied lipstick in front of the bathroom mirror, I suddenly noticed that the person in the mirror was trembling. That calculating version of me, shedding tears over a man. That day, I wiped away my tears, fixed my makeup, and put on my most expensive business suit. The car stopped downstairs at the office building. I looked up at the building he had bought for me. The sunlight reflected off the glass curtain wall, blinding my eyes with pain, but I didn't let another tear fall. Good morning, Miss Julia, the receptionist, Xiao Zhang, greeted respectfully. I smiled and nodded, stepping into the exclusive elevator in my custom high heels. In a turn of events, as Mrs. Tang, I signed a 9-figure deal. These past 2 years, I've been gentle and considerate, giving him all the emotional support he needed. And it was during these 2 years that my business empire no longer needed the Tang family's aura. When you become part of the rich elite, those scenes of compromise finally come to an end. It's a lie that I've been waiting for him to turn back. I only wanted him to feel more guilty, so I could get even more. Look, I'm even calculating divorce. Chapter 03. I thought it would be easy for us to break up if Alex Tang didn't love me anymore. But 3 days passed, and Alex still hadn't come home or replied to any of my messages. I called his special assistant. The phone rang for a long time before it was answered. Madam, Mr. Tang is in a board meeting. As soon as it's over, I'll let him know to call you back. I hung up the phone, buried myself in work, and when I finally looked up, it was already 3 p.m., and my phone screen had still not lit up. The sunlight outside the window was so bright it almost made me want to cry. I put on my sunglasses and drove to Tang Group. Good afternoon, madam. Good afternoon, madam. Everyone in the company greeted me respectfully, and I smiled and nodded in response. As perfectly as before, no one would have thought that this madam was in the middle of a divorce with their CEO. I pushed open the door to the CEO's office. Al. Before I could even say his name, I turned around. My nails dug deep into my palm, suppressing the sharp pain in my chest. At that moment, Vanessa was wrapped around Alex like a white snake, her silk blouse undone with 3 buttons, exposing a large amount of white skin. Alex had a cold expression, but his hands still rested on her waist. Sorry to interrupt, I said, my voice still surprisingly calm. Alex immediately shoved Vanessa away and chased after me, grabbing my wrist. Julia, let me explain. Feeling the eyes of the employees on us, I didn't want things to get too ugly. Having more friends is much better than having more enemies. Besides, he is the father of the child in my belly. Let's talk in the office. Vanessa was still flustered, fumbling to button up her blouse. The more anxious she became, the harder it was for her to fasten it. She revealed the ambiguous red marks on her neck. She looked at Alex for help, her eyes filled with tears. Alex's voice was as cold as ice. Get out! Go handle your resignation. Don't ever let me see you again. I'm pregnant with your child. Take care of it. Don't make me say it again. You'll regret this. Vanessa's face was as pale as death, with red eyes. She fled in panic. When the office was left with just the 2 of us, he rubbed his forehead wearily. 2 years ago, I was drugged. She helped me. So you needed 2 years of detox? I lightly touched my stomach, interrupting him with mockery. Or did you repay her by using your body to show gratitude? Julia. He reached out to touch me. I'll give you anything you want. Money, shares, property. I took a step back. I want freedom. Alex, can you give that to me? The dusk outside the window deepened, casting a sharp contrast against the bloodshot eyes of his. He suddenly pulled me into his arms, his warm lips brushing over my earlobe. No chance. I was just confused for a moment. I won't let her have the child. I'll cut ties with her. We'll start over. I interrupted, gently stroking my stomach. You know, emotional instability in pregnant women can affect fetal development. I don't want my child to be negatively affected. If you really loved me, let me go. Chapter 04. Leaving Alex's office, I bumped into Vanessa, who had clearly been waiting for a long time. Hey, what are you so proud of? She blocked my way, her voice dripping with arrogance. Alex was just being harsh with me to put on a show for you. How could he bear to fire me? I didn't even spare her a glance and walked straight around her. The scent of her perfume was giving me a headache. Vanessa lowered her voice. He said he loves me. He said you've already bored him. Like the leftover rice in a bowl. I paused for a moment, then slowly turned around. She immediately, smugly, touched her belly. He also said he's really looking forward to the birth of our child. Unlike you, who can't even, well, I wish you a quick and successful delivery then. I interrupted, smiling. She suddenly seemed a bit rattled. Julia, how cheap are you? Didn't you see those pictures? Your husband doesn't love you anymore. Can you really stand watching your husband sleep with other women? Don't you have any dignity? I sneered. Vanessa. Mistresses who are too bold in front of the wife rarely have a good ending. Her face went pale in an instant, and I elegantly pressed the elevator button. Just before the doors closed, I could still hear her low, cursing voice in the back of the Rolls-Royce. I watched the neon lights flicker outside the window and suddenly found it all laughable. The girl who once worked the night shift at a convenience store never imagined she'd one day have to worry about such things. Ironically, when Alex Tang pursued me, he really did seem like a lovesick fool. The heir of the Tang family. He waited in line for an hour in the freezing winter just to eat spicy skewers with me by the school gate. I remember him shivering from the cold, yet still smiling foolishly as he handed me the only hot milk tea he had. "Julia, I'll treat you well for the rest of my life," he had said back then, but he never said, "I'll treat you well for the rest of my life. And only you." So, it was only natural for him to change his heart. In their circle, though, Alex is still considered a model husband. At least he remembered to go home and act. And he never missed an anniversary post on social media. On Valentine's Day, there were always 999 roses. On my birthday, a Cartier gift. And on our wedding anniversary, he'd cancel all meetings to take me to a tropical island for a vacation. The socialites always liked to say, with fake sincerity, "Julia, you really must have accumulated a lot of good karma to marry a good man like Alex." I always smiled bashfully in response. Yes, I'm grateful every day, but no one knew that all I ever wanted in college was to find a regular office worker, someone to commute with on the subway, to binge-watch shows together on the weekends in a rented apartment. It was Alex who showed me the world of luxury and excess and made me change my original aspirations. The day I found out he was cheating, I actually felt a sense of relief. Like, finally, it's here. So, I only allowed myself to be sad for a minute. Then, I fixed my makeup in front of the mirror and went straight to sign a 9-figure contract. After all, love may fade, but bank accounts are forever loyal. Chapter 05. As the car drove into the villa area, my phone buzzed. An unknown number sent a multimedia message. Alex was holding the sobbing Vanessa, softly comforting her. I scoffed. Alex's security measures were flawless. But after seeing that lipstick mark, I had someone look into it. Nothing came up, but all his efforts couldn't stop the mistress from rushing to take her place. Over the past 2 years, this number had sent me no less than 100 intimate photos, from hotels to offices. All sorts of poses. Well, what kind of mistress isn't sending photos like these to secure her spot? I could easily use these photos to force Alex to divorce me. But when I thought about it, everything I had now, the luxurious mansion I lived in, the expensive car I drove, the position I had that everyone kissed up to, was all thanks to him. One shouldn't be too ungrateful. However, if he insists on clinging to me, I wouldn't mind showing him just how sharp this little canary's claws can get. Chapter 06. When Alex opened the door, I was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing at the night view. He was impeccably dressed in his suit, but he was holding a plastic bag from a convenience store, inside which lay 2 packs of instant noodles. "Julia, I'm back," he said softly, casually tossing my phone into the fish tank. Bubbles began to rise to the surface. Then came the tablet, the laptop, one by one. They sank to the bottom of the tank. I quietly watched the ripples spread across the water's surface. "Are you trying to imprison me?" He slowly unbuttoned his tie, his gaze soft to the point of being terrifying. "I just don't want unnecessary things, or unnecessary people, to disturb us." The next morning, sunlight streamed through the sheer curtains into the kitchen. Alex, wearing an apron, was cooking instant noodles. The brand was the same as the one I had asked him to try at the convenience store that day. "Try this," he said, proudly bringing a bowl to me, his eyes sparkling with expectation. I took the bowl, eating it slowly, bite by bite. The noodles were overcooked, the broth too thin, and the taste was overly salty. But for some reason, it made my eyes well up. He watched me finish the last bite, a satisfied smile on his face, the same smile I had once known. On the 3rd day, he somehow found an old, rusty bicycle. The back seat was cushioned with his discarded suit jacket, but it still felt uncomfortable and painful. He pedaled slowly, afraid of bumping me. "Hold on tight," he said, facing the wind, his voice full of laughter. I wrapped my arms around his waist, resting my face on his back. His white shirt smelled of sunlight, but it was still different from the memory I had. On the 4th night, He set up a projector in the living room. He dug out the old movie DVD we had watched countless times. The image now blurry. Halfway through, I, just like before, fell asleep resting on his shoulder. In my drowsy state, I felt him gently carry me back to the bedroom and place a kiss on my forehead. On the 5th day, the garden was filled with scented candles. He was holding the dusty guitar, playing the song we sang on our first date. His tone was completely off-key, but it made me tear up. On the 6th day, the sweet smell of chocolate wafted from the kitchen. He was clumsily making the handmade chocolates he gave me when he confessed his love. Though they melted and lost shape, I ate them one by one in front of him. On the 7th night, as I passed the study, I heard muffled arguing from inside. Peeking through the door crack, I saw him yelling at the computer. "Get rid of the child. I'll pay whatever it takes." On the screen, Vanessa was crying uncontrollably. I quietly retreated to the bedroom and took the divorce agreement I had prepared from the vanity drawer. The 7-day love game was about to come to an end. When Alex returned to the bedroom, the first thing he saw was the divorce agreement. Without hesitation, he tore it up. "Julia, you will never divorce me. I've worked so hard to marry you, and I'll never let you leave," I said. "Alex, you will," he shouted. "No, I won't. I'll never let you go." His voice carried a finality I had never heard before. Not in this lifetime. Chapter 07. Alex Tang says that he went through a great deal to marry me. And that's not untrue. That year, in the dead of winter, a thin layer of ice had formed on the cobblestone path in the Tang family's old residence. He knelt there, his black coat slowly soaking in the snow. The butler said that the young master had been kneeling for 3 days and nights. Even the old man's most cherished purple clay teapots had been broken 3 times. When I went to bring him some ginger tea, he was being punished by the family. The Tang family's rattan whips were custom-made, soaked in brine, and one strike would make a person tremble with pain. He endured 100 lashes, and in the end, he was carried out. The lights in the hospital hallway were a harsh white, and when the doctor handed me the critical illness notice, I finally knelt on the ground, praying for his safety. His blood type was rare, and the entire city's blood bank was in shortage. In the end, the old man used a military helicopter to transfer blood from a neighboring province. Ironically, this marriage, one forced by the threat of death, eventually became the best public relations case for Tang Group. The financial section praised the young master's devotion. The entertainment section hyped up the Cinderella fairy tale. Even the bouquet at our wedding made the stock price jump by 2 points. Later, in the study, the old man said to me, "Do you really believe that Cinderella will live happily ever after with the prince?" His sandalwood cane tapped on the latest financial report. "Little girl, don't be so naive." I lowered my head and handed him a cup of tea. "Grandfather, I'm never naive." Chapter 08. At 3 in the morning, Alex's phone suddenly lit up in the dark. I squinted my eyes and saw the word assistant repeatedly flashing on the screen. "Mr. Tang, the photos of you and Vanessa have gone viral on social media." The voice on the other end of the line was cautious. Alex suddenly sat up, the silk sheets slipping off him. When he turned to look at me, the moonlight fell perfectly on his tense jawline. I pretended to turn over, hearing him walk barefoot out of the bedroom, the door closing softly behind him. He was suppressing his anger, no matter how much it costs. Everything must be cleaned up before sunrise. The assistant hesitated. "They say it's not about the money. Then have the platform shut them down. It's a small platform." I contacted them, but they refused to cooperate. I listened to the voices coming through the door crack. Sighing, I lay back down to sleep. Yet, a wave of bitterness rose in my heart. I had wanted things to end amicably, but in the end, I had resorted to manipulation. Chapter 09. The Tang Group's official public account released an official statement at 4 a.m. Solemn declaration. Recently, false information regarding Mr. Alex and Ms. Vanessa has been circulating online. After verification, it was found to be maliciously altered images. The relevant matters are hereby formally clarified as follows. Mr. Alex and Ms. Vanessa only have a normal business relationship. The images circulating online have been professionally authenticated as forged. Evidence regarding the false information has been preserved, and legal action will be taken against the spreaders of the rumors. Tang Group has always adhered to the principles of honest business and is committed to protecting the company's image and the legal rights of its employees. We earnestly request that the public refrain from believing or spreading rumors. This declaration is accompanied by a scanned copy of the official document with the company seal and the image authentication report from a professional agency. The comment section has been set to display only messages from verified official accounts. The official website of Tang Group has also updated the statement with a prominent floating window. Less than an hour after the statement was issued by the Tang Group's public account, the topic Alex and Vanessa confirmed suddenly appeared on the trending search list. In the 9-grid photo, the scene of the two kissing on a private yacht is clearly visible. Even the limited edition Patek Philippe watch on Alex's wrist is captured in full detail. It's as if, when one side refuses to admit, the other side will never give up. Would Tang Group really take legal action? I doubt they would, since the truth can't stand up to a deep investigation. I walk barefoot on the Persian carpet and see Alex curled up on the sofa. His phone screen is still on, showing a message from Vanessa. Alex, they're all insulting me. The lock screen wallpaper is still a photo from our wedding in the Maldives. I cover him with a thin blanket. I take a close look at his features, mature and steady, no longer the way he was in his youth. The next morning, the Tang Group building was surrounded, with no room to spare. Journalists, armed with long lenses, loudly shouted the headline, "The fairy tale of the wealthy family is broken." The media is waiting for Tang Group to give an explanation. After all, our wedding had been an unprecedentedly grand affair. The love story of Cinderella and the prince had drawn everyone's attention. The media outlets that had once wished us well were now like vultures smelling rotten meat, ready to feast on the spectacle. Tang Group's stock plummeted right after the market opened, hitting the limit down. But Alex Tang remained indifferent. He continued to play the game of romance with me. For 3 days straight, strangers kept leaking more and more information. They even clearly revealed the timeline of when Alex and Vanessa had been together. He looked haggard. On the 4th day, shareholders gathered in front of the villa's ornate iron gate. I stood on the spiral staircase and saw Alex standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, the ashtray filled with cigarette butts. In the morning light, his silhouette suddenly looked like he had aged 10 years. Is this marriage really impossible to save? He turned around, his gaze falling on my slightly protruding belly. I told you you'd agree, I said softly, feeling a surge of frustration as I looked at his weary face. He stubbed out the cigarette, his voice full of exhaustion. If this is what you want, I agree. I'll have the lawyer draft the agreement. All right. Chapter 10. Alex Tang held a press conference. The flashing lights were like a torrential downpour, and the journalists scrambled to throw sharp questions. Mr. Tang, intimate photos of you and Vanessa have been circulating all over the internet. May I ask, have you cheated on your wife? Miss Julia, how do you feel about your husband's betrayal? Have the two of you separated? I gently pressed my fingers on Alex's tense arm. My fingertips tapped 3 times on his cufflink. The secret signal we had agreed on, meaning I'll handle it. Once the room quieted down a bit, I gracefully took the microphone. First of all, I would like to thank all the media friends for your concern. My voice was as calm as any other press conference. Mr. Tang and I signed a divorce agreement 2 years ago. However, due to commercial cooperation and shareholder interests, we did not disclose it publicly until now. A stir rippled through the crowd. The journalists' fingers furiously pounded on their keyboards, and the news would sweep the internet in a minute. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Alex's fingers tightening at his sides, his knuckles turning white. His eyes were filled with rage. Vanessa, somehow, had already squeezed into the front row. She was wearing a white dress today, looking like a fragile little flower. A flash of joy crossed her eyes, followed by a look of feigned sorrow. As she hurried forward to link her arm with Alex's, her voice was sweet. Julia, you're so considerate. Actually, Alex and I are both very grateful for your understanding, she added with hidden meaning. After all, when it comes to emotions, you can't force it, right? I looked at her innocent expression, a perfect smile playing at the corners of my lips. Mr. Tang and Vanessa started their relationship after our divorce. Although we have separated, the cooperation between Tang Group and Bai Group will not be affected. I paused for a moment, scanning the room. After all, business is business, and emotions are emotions. Vanessa suddenly reddened, her acting worthy of an Academy Award. Julia, your words make me feel even more guilty. She turned to the media, her voice trembling. In fact, I have always respected Julia. But when it comes to emotions, she paused, leaving just the right amount of space for imagination. I scoffed. What a fool. Alex's face darkened to an alarming degree. He yanked his arm away sharply, his voice cold, not sparing Vanessa a single glance. As Miss Julia said, we maintain a respectful relationship. Even though we are divorced, we are still very good business partners. The press conference ended in a strange atmosphere. Chapter 11. After the press conference, Alex was called away by his assistant. Vanessa blocked me backstage, tears still staining her face, but her voice was filled with provocation. Miss Julia, since you're already divorced, don't appear in front of Alex again. I calmly placed my handbag on the makeup table, leisurely applying lipstick. Vanessa should know better than I do what the truth is. I turned to face her, giving her a faint smile. Even though Alex and I are divorced, I won't avoid him. After all, the Tang Group and Bai Group's cooperative project is worth $7 billion. If I don't see him, do you want to sign the papers? Vanessa's expression stiffened. I continued. Moreover, I gently stroked my flat stomach. Alex is still the father of my child. I may avoid him, but the child cannot grow up without a father. Don't you think so? Her expression instantly froze, her meticulously applied eye makeup widening as if her eyes might pop out of her head. This can't be. I elegantly picked up my handbag. Congratulations. You're about to become Mrs. Tang. As I walked out of the dressing room, I took a deep breath. The cool air in the underground parking lot hit me as I walked in my 7 centimeters high heels, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the empty space. Why did you have to say that? Alex suddenly rushed out and grabbed my wrist. His voice was low, his eyes swirling with emotions I couldn't read. I gently pulled my hand away. The script had long been written. I was supposed to smile gracefully, say the photos were just poorly done edits, claim it was all a ridiculous misunderstanding, and then sign the divorce agreement in private. But in the end, I tore up the script. The reporters aren't fools. You and Vanessa are together, and it won't hold up under further investigation. Anyway, the stock price has stabilized. The outcome is the same. It doesn't matter. His eyes reddened. You really want me to be with Vanessa? I smiled. With so many reporters watching, I was just going with the flow. His Adam's apple bobbed. You know that Vanessa and I are just a fling. I finished his sentence for him, my smile not reaching my eyes. The industry is like that. Mr. Tang doesn't need to explain. I understand. Since you understand how the industry works, why can't you just? I looked into his eyes, filled with struggle, and then turned. Getting into my car, the driver asked, Miss Julia, where to? To the company. Sitting in the car, I suddenly remembered the first time I attended a high society dinner. How those ladies talked so casually about their husbands' lovers. The shock and confusion I felt then had now turned into a bitter smile on my lips. I thought I could be like them, learning to turn a blind eye. But in the end, I couldn't. Every time I thought of Alex entangled with another woman, my heart would tighten as if gripped by an invisible hand, aching and trembling. And in my heart, there was also anger. But it was fine. After 2 years of patience, Bai Capital no longer needed to rely on the Tang Group. Those business plans I'd stayed up late to revise alone in the dark hours, those social gatherings where I pretended to be Mrs. Tang, finally gave me the confidence to walk away unscathed. Chapter 12. The stock price of Tang Group finally stabilized. Vanessa's grand debut was continuously hyped by the media for several days. It was clear that the public didn't fully believe our story about being divorced long ago. While financial reporters analyzed the stock price fluctuations, the entertainment section continued to speculate. The so-called divorce 2 years ago was nothing more than a public relations stunt to cover up Alex's infidelity. After all, our marriage had once shocked the entire H-City, and for it to end so quietly with a divorce was hardly believable. If Vanessa had been smart, she should have remained silent. The parties involved had already clarified the matter, and the platform had issued an apology. They admitted that the photos were fabricated. The reporters lacked concrete evidence, and at most, they wrote a few speculative articles. But she, of course, chose to perform that poorly executed act at the press conference. With red eyes, she linked her arm with Alex's, saying, "I respect Sister Julia," while her eyes clearly conveyed pride. The result was predictable. Labels like green tea, White Lotus, and scheming mistress instantly flooded the internet. Netizens even dug up old photos of her from when she mingled with the wealthy elite. Different parties, similar white dresses, the same delicate and fragile posture. Her social media accounts were thoroughly attacked, and even Alex's public image suffered backlash. After all, our grand wedding had once caused a citywide sensation. And now, it ended in this manner. How could people not feel a sense of regret? I sat in my office, watching news alerts pop up one after another, unable to stop myself from sneering. Some people, they could have quietly remained invisible, but instead, they stepped out to humiliate themselves. Chapter 13. The day the divorce agreement was signed, sunlight streamed through the law office's floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow on my rounded belly. The terms Alex gave were far more generous than I had expected. He gave me all of his fixed assets. He even promised that after the child was born, he would transfer 15% of Tang Group's shares to the child's name. When the lawyer read the final clause, my fingertips unconsciously traced the edge of the paper. This agreement was 3 times thicker than the one I had drafted for him. Even the villa where we were living was left to me. The butler said Mr. Tang had specifically instructed that all the furniture and arrangements be kept the same to avoid disturbing the pregnant woman. I looked at the starry light in the master bedroom that he had installed himself, suddenly realizing that this man truly had loved me. I had never believed in the fairy tale that Cinderella would live happily ever after with the prince. Reality had proven me right. In our 5 years of marriage, I wasn't like those naive, sweet heroines in novels. I didn't expect my man's wholehearted love. Instead, I used the little love he had for me to finally cross the class divide. I packed up all his things and had my assistant deliver them to his new villa the same day. But unexpectedly, in the afternoon, his assistant arrived with a convoy. Ringing the doorbell, 3 business cars were packed with baby supplies, German-made anti-regurgitation thermos bottles, Swiss customized pure cotton swaddles. Even the aroma in the baby's room was cedarwood, the scent I had always preferred. When the assistant handed me the delivery receipt, he hesitated. "Mr. Tang said, if you don't like these styles, thank him for me." I swiftly signed my name, suddenly remembering how he had taught me to sign contracts when we got married. Back then, he held my hand and said, "The grip should be firm." Now, my signature could tear through the paper. After the divorce, I became a legend in H City's business circle. The wealthy women who had once looked down on my humble beginnings now scrambled to invite me to charity auctions. The 20% discount on the Tang Group's cooperation terms had caused my company's valuation to double in just 3 months. On the day I signed the international order, I donated to the city's welfare institute. When the director took my hand and said, "You've finally put my mind at ease," I looked at the familiar Tang signature on the donation list, my eyes unmoved. In the 8th month of pregnancy, I still attended the tech summit. Under the crystal chandelier, I held my belly and gracefully raised my glass. The CEO, Mr. Lee, who had once mocked me as a climber, was now smiling widely, toasting me. "Miss Julia is truly a remarkable woman, working hard for her career even while about to give birth. Compared to Mr. Lee's feat of discussing business while on N4 drip, what I'm doing hardly compares." As I swirled my pomegranate juice and turned, I bumped into a pair of deep-set eyes. Alex was standing 3 steps away, his navy blue tie tied in a Windsor knot just below his Adam's apple. That had been my birthday gift to him last year. His gaze moved from my rounded belly to my face, his Adam's apple bobbing. He finally just raised his glass. When the waiter accidentally bumped into me, Alex moved faster than his bodyguards to reach me. His hand, warm and dry, caught my elbow, and on his ring finger, he still wore our wedding ring. "Be careful," he said. That was the first thing we said to each other after the divorce. I had told Vanessa that I would still keep in touch with Alex. In fact, I tried to avoid meeting him as much as possible. Any matters were handled by my assistant. Chapter 14. I smiled and thanked her, then turned to leave Alex and continued to gracefully mingle with the guests. When Vanessa appeared, the entire banquet hall seemed to quiet for a moment. She walked in on stiletto heels, wearing a perfectly tailored red evening gown, her lips painted a bright red, her gaze piercing directly at me. "Miss Julia, long time no see." She smiled brilliantly, but her voice was as cold as ice. "You're still working so hard while pregnant. Really impressive." I noticed her flat stomach and smiled at the corner of my mouth. On the day I picked up the divorce certificate, I opened up that unfamiliar numbers chat right in front of Alex. And in front of him, I deleted the explicit photos one by one. The effect was excellent. Alex's assets could only belong to the child in my belly. I swirled my pomegranate juice in my glass, a slight smile curling at my lips. "You're too kind, Vanessa." Suddenly, she stepped forward, her high heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. "But some things that aren't yours, don't covet them." The surrounding conversations gradually lowered, and everyone's eyes seemed to subtly shift in our direction. Although we held a press conference, that was just to fool the outsiders within our circle, who didn't know about the relationship between the three of us. I tilted my head slightly, feigning confusion. "What do you mean?" She scoffed and raised her voice deliberately. "Alex's company gives you a 20% discount, regularly sends you baby supplies and pregnancy supplements, and even when you go for your checkups." She paused, a mocking smile appearing on her red lips. "He even stands in the hospital corridor until you're done." The banquet hall fell completely silent. I gently caressed my belly and looked at her. So? Her voice suddenly became sharp, as if my calmness had triggered her anger. "You know all of this, yet you don't stop it. You happily accept it. You're divorced, but you still seduce him." I chuckled softly, my pregnancy slowing my movements, but it didn't stop me from looking down on her. "Vanessa, Alex won't marry you because he doesn't love you." Her expression froze. I slowly adjusted my shawl. "You've been with him all this time, yet you can't even get a proper title. That's truly pitiful." Her nails dug deep into her palms, and her meticulously done face twisted slightly. "Do you think you've won? He pities you. It's just because of the child in your belly. Who knows if your child is even his?" Seeing the madness in her eyes, I instinctively protected my swollen belly. I thought Vanessa had lost it, that she might attack me at any moment. I squinted, scanning the surroundings. If she snapped, how would I protect myself? "Vanessa." A deep, cold male voice came from behind her. Alex, I realized, had appeared behind her, his expression stern, the pressure around him so intense that it felt suffocating. I let out a silent sigh of relief. Thank goodness. Vanessa spun around suddenly, her fierce expression immediately turning into one of trembling fear. "Alex, who told you to appear here? Get out." His voice was quiet, yet it sent a chill through everyone in the banquet hall. Vanessa's face turned pale. "You can't see," I said. Alex repeated slowly. "Get out." His assistant immediately stepped forward and, with polite firmness, escorted Vanessa out of the hall. The banquet hall was completely silent. Alex's gaze fell on me, his Adam's apple moving slightly, but he only murmured, "I'll take you home." I smiled faintly and shook my head. "No need, Mr. Tang." As I turned to leave, I heard him say from behind, "Can I be there when you give birth?" Sure. I didn't turn around. After all, this is also your child. You'll always protect them. I didn't look at the stars shining in his eyes. I only knew that I was very close to achieving my goal. Chapter 15. The next day, my assistant reported that Vanessa had been sent away, and this time, she would never be able to return. I smiled and said, "Go tell Mr. Tang that in 20 days, I'll be having a cesarean section." Obsessions. Lingering attachments, this is how it should be. Outside the delivery room, Alex's suit was a mess, wrinkled beyond recognition. When the nurse came out holding the crying babies, the man who was decisive in the business world actually staggered for a moment. "Twins. Both are very healthy." He shakily took the swaddling, tears falling on the babies' wrinkled little faces. I lay on the stretcher, watching him, suddenly reminded of that snowy night 5 years ago. He had kneeled at the Tang family's old house, begging Mr. Tang to agree to our marriage, and his tears had been just as hot then. "Let's do a paternity test," I said hoarsely when the anesthetic wore off. He shook his head, gently wiping the corner of my eye with his finger. I trust you. But I still had my assistant send the samples. The child was indeed not conceived from our physical relations. It was from the year we were most in love, when he froze his sperm, and as his wife, it was legal and legitimate for me to use it. When the report came back, Alex divided his 15% shares in Tang Group between the two children. Mr. Tang also sent a generous gift, and the same old man who once said I wasn't worthy of his grandson now had a check with a hefty sum. You've really impressed me. He glanced at the crib before leaving. I smiled calmly at the two little ones. They were both mine, and after the divorce, I had secured so many benefits for them. Look, isn't your mom amazing? After the babies were born, my relationship with Alex seemed to soften. He started appearing frequently at the villa. Sometimes, he brought Swiss-made rattles. Other times, he quietly sat by the cradle, working. Vanessa was like an erased pencil mark. No one ever mentioned her again. When the twins were 3, Alex said, "Julia, let's remarry." I shook my head. I think we're fine as we are. At least we're free. Chapter 16. After Alex's proposal for remarriage was rejected, he never mentioned it again. Instead, he bought the villa next door to Julia's. Standing by the third-floor windows, he watched Julia holding the children, sitting in the garden and enjoying the sun. He suddenly thought she was right. This was fine. At least he could watch Julia smile as she raised the children. He loved Julia deeply, to his very bones. He would even give his life for her. But their world was like a bottomless murky pool, and no matter how clear-headed one was, they would inevitably be stained. He thought he could maintain his boundaries. But one drunken night, he was enchanted by the scent of Vanessa's perfume. Those photos were so clear. On the day they got their marriage certificate, Julia deleted those photos from the stranger's account right in front of him. No wonder. He thought he had done a good job keeping things secret. There was never a night he didn't come home. He never neglected his wife. He could differentiate. Outside women were just distractions. But Julia, at home, was his true home for the soul. But after seeing those photos, he realized how foolish he had been. He had underestimated a woman's determination to rise. That night, he pinned her against the wall by her neck. Did I ever tell you some boundaries shouldn't be crossed? Vanessa's face flushed red as she struggled. You and Julia are already divorced. I'm carrying. He released his grip and interrupted her. Illegitimate. He calmly wiped his fingertips with a handkerchief. Tomorrow at 10, People's Hospital. Later, it was reported that Vanessa suffered severe blood loss on the operating table and would never be able to have children again. Meanwhile, he was attending a board meeting. His pen paused for half a second before continuing to sign on the merger documents. That night, the lead surgeon's account received a 7-digit transfer. A woman who could no longer have children was just that, something to be kept, but not something to be valued. What he didn't expect was that she still had the courage to find Julia. Vanessa was sent away by him, and she would never be able to return. The floor-to-ceiling window reflected his lonely figure as red wine swirled in his glass. In this world, everyone craved true love, yet everyone was best at trampling on it. He once thought he would be the exception, but in the end, he had become the most cliched of men. He chuckled bitterly, raising his glass and drinking it all. This was all his doing. Chapter 17. My new boyfriend, Skylar, is a 185-meter-tall model. He loves wandering around the villa in the high-end shirts I gave him, his 8-pack abs barely visible, acting like a large, affectionate dog. Sis, can you come with me to the art exhibition today? His chin rested on my shoulder, his eyelashes shimmering gold in the sunlight. I know he's after my black card, just as I enjoy his unending enthusiasm and the perfect amount of jealousy. The day Alex caught Skylar, my little boyfriend was crouching in the garden, tying my shoelaces. I looked up and met Alex's gaze. The Lego set he had bought for the kids fell with a clink. For an entire week, Tang Group swooped in and took 3 of my projects. The business world's battleground had spilled into my home, and even my daughter looked up at me and asked, "Mom, why did Daddy throw away the toy Skylar uncle gave me?" I gently laughed while stroking my daughter's soft hair. Alex probably still lives in that self-deceiving dream, thinking that even if we don't remarry, we can still go on like this. He still doesn't believe that our divorce was part of my well-planned scheme. Last night, While cleaning up old things, I came across that photo of Alex kneeling on the cruise ship, begging to marry me. It made me think of that time in the snow, his back soaked with blood, like red plums blooming in the cold. Looking back now, was I moved? Yes. Moved. Shocked. Heartbroken. Willing. Skylar wrapped his arms around me from behind. What are you looking at? His warm breath brushed against my ear, his youthful body full of vitality. I closed the photo album, suddenly realizing that the Alex who once made my heart flutter now seemed as blurry as a faded old photo. Outside the floor-to-ceiling window, Alex's car had been parked on the side of the road all night. Should we invite him in? Skylar offered me a cup of warm milk. I pulled the curtains closed. No need. Chapter 18. On my 40th birthday, I had my lawyer deliver the breakup agreement to Skylar's apartment. He rushed into my office, still wearing the limited edition suit I had given him, his tie crooked, looking like an abandoned large dog. What did I do wrong? His eyes were red, and even as a 30-year-old man, he still cried with a boyish sense of injustice. The sunlight shone through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating his carefully toned abs. I suddenly remembered the fashion show from 10 years ago, when it was exactly this kind of look that made me stop in my tracks. I pushed aside the financial statements and gestured for him to sit. You're great. I gently tapped the pen on the agreement. This villa is yours, and you're used to driving the Aston Martin in the garage. He grabbed my hand suddenly. I don't want any of this. I pulled my hand back. Don't be naive. You came to me for all of this, didn't you? Skylar eventually signed the agreement, his handwriting strong and decisive. As he stood at the door to leave, his voice was hoarse. At least tell me why. I spun in my office chair, gazing out the window. The sky at 40 looked no different than at 30. The warmth of those late nights was, in the end, just a transaction where both sides took what they needed. I'm tired of it, I said. The snow fell harder, quickly covering the footprints he left behind. The next day, Tang Group sent over a cooperation proposal. I flipped open the proposal, and next to Alex Tang's strong signature, there was a small heart drawn. This man in his 40s still kept such a childish habit. My phone buzzed, and Alex sent me a message. I heard you broke up. Does this mean you're willing to consider me again? I scoffed. Men are really ridiculous, clearly. They've let go. But once they do, they desperately chase after you. There's younger flesh waiting for me. Why would I bother with an older man? I replied, you're just the father of my children.